So what I want to do in this video is we're going to start the video series on measurement conversions. So we're going to do a brief intro to the US or English measurement system, and then we're going to look at the metric system of measurement. And we're also going to kind of exclusively talk about length in this video, okay? But before we get started, there are a few things that you need to know. So let's go ahead and jump over to the whiteboard. Okay, fair warning, when I use my laptop, I have two ways to make videos, my laptop or my tablet. When I use my laptop, I don't have a very good stylus or pen to use, so it's a little bit messy. The penmanship is kind of gross, but it's enough for you to kind of get the gist, okay? So again, we are measuring length, and we're looking at the metric system. So I think you can kind of see what I mean about it's a little bit messy, but I need to flip back and forth between the whiteboard and a formula sheet, and it's just easier to do on my laptop. So it's a little messy, but I think at the end it'll be fine. So before we get started in actually doing the conversions, let's talk about a few definitions. So the first is dimensional analysis. Okay. So dimensional analysis is the process of converting one unit of measure to another by multiplying by one or more unit fractions. So again, it's messy. I promise in real life, my penmanship is much better than this, but I don't have a good stylus or a pen to use on this laptop. So this is the best that we can do, but hopefully you can read it. So again, dimensional analysis, it's the process of converting from one unit of measure to another by multiplying by one or more unit fractions. So this right here begs to question, well, what on earth is a unit fraction? So unit fractions are a huge part of measurement conversion. So unit fractions, these are fractions that have a value of 1. Whoops. That have a value of 1, but the numerator and denominator are made up of different units of measure. Okay, so a classic example that I use for everybody is feet and inches. Most of us are pretty familiar with that, okay? So I'm going to go to another screen so I can show you. So we know the following. We know that 12 inches is equal to 1 foot, okay? So they represent the same length, right? So we can create a fraction out of 12 inches and 1 foot where the value of the fraction is equal to 1, because remember, another thing that we know is if you take a number and divide it by exactly itself, it equals 1. Well, the same thing happens when you're dealing with measurements. If you take the same length and divide it by exactly itself, you get a value of 1. So we could write this as 12 inches. Notice my abbreviations is 1 foot. Well, that has a value of 1 because we're taking the same length, dividing it by exactly itself. You could also write this as 1 foot over 12 inches. Again, you're going to have a fraction that equals 1. And in math, a lot of times we use the word 1 and unit interchangeably. So a unit ends up meaning just 1. So we have two different unit fractions here. They both equal 1. The numerator and denominator are made of different units of measure. And flipping the order, like in the first one, I have inches in the top, feet in the bottom. In the second one, I have feet in the top, inches in the bottom. That is going to matter when we start doing our conversions, and I'll explain that when the time comes. Now, one thing that we need to notice too is in this video, we're talking exclusively about length, okay? So just linear measurements. So in this case, length we're just talking about quite literally a linear measure. We use regular units. Now, that may not make a lick of sense right now, but when we get into the next video in this series, we're going to talk about area and volume, and we're going to use different types of units. So in this case, if you're dealing with miles, it's just plain miles. If you're dealing with kilometers, it's plain kilometers. If you're dealing with inches, centimeters, feet, meters, yards, you're just dealing with plain old inches, feet, centimeters, yards, okay? You don't have to do anything weird to the units, whereas in the next video, we're going to have to use square units and cubic units, okay? So again here, just plain old regular units, all right? So let's go ahead and practice a little bit. So we're going to talk first about the English system of measurement, and then we're going to flip over and we're going to talk about the metric system of measurement. And here's where I want to show you the formula sheet now, or the conversion chart. Everybody's going to have access to this. Everybody's going to get their own hard copy of this, okay? But this, let me go back. I think it stopped sharing. There we go. So this is the formula sheet. Everybody's going to get a hard copy of this. I'll have it posted in Moodle, but I'll flip back and forth between this and the whiteboard as I make this video. So when we're talking about the English system of measurement, specifically for length, we're looking at this information right here. The English system of measurement is inches, yards, feet, and miles as far as length is concerned. When we start talking about the metric system, we're going to be talking about meters, kilometers, decameters, decimeters, centimeters, and so forth, but we'll get into that in just a minute. Okay, but for now, we're looking at just this information. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Okay, so back to the whiteboard, and let's just try some examples. That's the easiest way to learn this, is just to kind of dive in. So let's say that we have 78 inches and we want to convert it to feet. Well, here's how we use dimensional analysis in unit fractions. We start with what we know. We know we have 78 inches. We want to write that as a fraction. So I'm just going to put it over 1. And now I need to multiply it by 1 or more unit fractions so that I can convert inches to feet. Now, when it comes to creating the unit fraction, you need a fraction that has a value of 1. So that means the same length divided by the same length, but you want different units. And in this particular case, we're hoping to cancel out units. And in math, when we're dealing with fractions, things cancel vertically. So something in the top cancels something in the bottom. So when I set this up, I want to set it up so that inches are in the denominator and feet are in the numerator. And what will happen is the inches, like the actual unit inches, will quite literally cancel, and I'll be left with feet, my desired unit, in the numerator. So let's fill in some numbers. We know that there are 12 inches to 1 foot. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. The inches have canceled. I'm left with feet in the numerator. So my numerator is now 78 times 1 feet. So just 78 times 1 is 78 feet. The denominator is just 1 times 12, so 12. And as long as you show me this setup, you can then use the calculator to do the division of 78 divided by 12. So 78 divided by 12, you should get 6.5 feet. And that is the final answer. So we have that 78 inches is equivalent to 6.5 feet. And that is dimensional analysis. That's using unit fractions. That is converting from one unit to another. And again, this is strictly within the English measurement system. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's say we have 17,160 feet and we want to convert it to miles. The abbreviation for miles is just MI. Okay, so just like in the previous example, we're going to start with what we know. We know we have 17,160 feet. I want to write that as a fraction. So I'm just going to put it over 1. All right, and now I need to multiply by a unit fraction that relates feet and miles. And I very specifically want feet in the denominator because remember, units cancel top to bottom. So since feet are in the numerator in that first fraction, feet need to be in the denominator in the second fraction. Okay, so let's go back to our conversion sheet. So right here we have, if you look at this bottom one right here, we have that there are 5,280 feet to 1 mile. So that's what we're going to use in our unit fraction. So let's go back to the whiteboard. All right, so there are 5,280 feet to 1 mile. We want to make sure everything cancels, clean things up, and then do our division. So as far as canceling goes, feet cancel, and I'm left with my desired unit in the numerator, okay? I'm going to clean things up a little bit. Whoops. I'm going to clean things up a little bit. My numerator is 17,160 times 1, and then I just get feet. My denominator is 1 times 5,280. And now, as long as you show me this setup, you're welcome to use your calculator to do the division. And we get 3.25 miles. So if I have 17,160 feet, that is equivalent to 3.25 miles. Okay, so again, this is the heart and soul of dimensional analysis. All right, again, you're taking one unit, you're converting it to another by multiplying by one or more unit fractions. Okay, let's try another one. Let's say this time we have 3 inches and we want to convert it to yards. Okay, so let's take a look at our conversion sheet. You could do this one of two ways. I'm going to show you the quicker way to do this. In this particular case, we do have a conversion that takes us from inches directly to yards. Sometimes you won't have that. So if that were the case, what we would have to do is we would have to go inches to feet, and then we'd have to convert feet to yards. But in this particular case, we have a conversion. We know that 36 inches is exactly 1 foot, so we're just going to cut right to it. Okay, so remember 36 inches to 1 yard. I think I said 36 inches to 1 foot, 36 inches to 1 yard. Okay, so we're going to start with what we know. We know that we have 3 inches. I'm going to write that as a fraction. I need to multiply it by a unit fraction that relates inches to yards. And remember, 36 inches to 1 yard. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel some units, and then I'm going to clean things up, and then I'm going to get my final answer. So as far as canceling units go, inches cancel. My desired unit is in the numerator. All right, I'm going to clean things up. My numerator is 3 times 1, which is just 3 yards. My denominator is 1 times 36, or 36. And as far as simplifying this goes, we're going to get either a decimal or a fraction answer. My desired answer would be a reduced fraction, but depending on what your homework wants, read the directions. They may want a decimal rounded to a particular place value. They may want a fraction or a mixed number. Just follow the instructions, okay? In this case, if I were to write this as a simplified fraction, I know that 3 and 36 are both divisible by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 36 divided by 3 is 12. So I would get 1/12 of a yard. Now, if the directions specified that they wanted a decimal, you would just take 3 divided by 36, and you would get 0.083. And it does have a repeat on the 3, so it's 0.083333333. So you can just put a little bar over the 3, and that tells the reader that that 3 repeats. Okay, so again, my preferred answer here would be 1/12 of a yard, but if the directions tell you to write your answer as a decimal, please do so. So either of these would be correct. All right, so that's a good overview of the English measurement system and how to convert. So this again is specifically length. So remember, we're measuring length, and then here in just a second, we're going to look at the metric system. But first, dimensional analysis is the process of converting one unit of measure to another unit of measure by multiplying by one or more unit fractions. Unit fractions are fractions that have a value of 1, but the numerator and denominator are made up of different units of measure. We looked at the example of 12 inches to 1 foot. So I could write 2 unit fractions, 12 inches divided by 1 foot. Again, 12 inches is the exact same length as 1 foot. So when you put 12 inches over 1 foot, that fraction has a value of 1. We could also write it as 1 foot over 12 inches. And then I did tell you that when we're talking about length, we're just talking about a linear measurement, and we just use regular units. So when you look at the examples we did here, when we convert 78 inches to feet, we just use plain old feet. When we convert feet to miles, we just use plain old miles. When we convert inches to yards, we just use plain old yards. In future sections, instead of using yards, you would use square yards or cubic yards, okay? So just know that in the next video, we'll talk more about that, how we represent the units, okay? For now, let's go ahead and talk about the metric system, okay? So the metric system, we use some of it here in the US. What's really nice about the metric system is it's all based on Powers of 10. So 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, or 1/10, 100th, 1,000, so forth. And what's really great about powers of 10 is when you're dealing with powers of 10, you can just multiply and divide by moving decimal points. And so we're going to look at a shortcut way to convert within the metric system. You could certainly use unit fractions to convert within the metric system, but there is a shortcut. I'm going to show you the shortcut. Why make this harder than it needs to be? Now, there are 3 basic units, okay? So when you're dealing with the metric system, for us, we have length, we have weight, we have capacity. So think like liquid measurements. For length, the basic unit is a meter. So that's what we're going to focus on in this video. When you're talking about capacity or liquid type measurements, you're dealing with the liter. And when you're talking about weight, you're talking about a gram. Okay, so basic units for the metric system: meter, liter, gram. Again, this video, we're going to focus on the meter. There are then 6 prefixes. So you slap one of the prefixes in front of meter, liter, gram, and it changes it from 1 meter to multiple meters or partial meters. Ditto for liters and grams. So here are the prefixes. We have kilo, which means 1,000. We have hecto, which means 100. And we have deca, which means 10. I will tell you the abbreviation for kilo is K, and then you would put M for meter, L for liter, or G for gram after. For hecto, it's H, and then again, follow that with an M, an L, or a G, depending on what basic unit. For deca, be careful. Deca, the abbreviation is DA, and then followed with an M, an L, or a G. Now, we also have deci, which equals 1/10. So the abbreviation for deci is just a plain D, followed by an M, an L, or a G. We have centi, which is 100th. And the abbreviation is just a C, followed by an M, an L, or a G. And then we have milli, which is 1,000th. And the abbreviation would be M, followed by an M, an L, or a G, depending on if you're dealing with meters, liters, or grams. Now, remember, this video, we're talking specifically length, so we're going to focus on just the meter. And I think the best way to explain this is just to dive in with examples, okay? So first of all, there is an order to this. And if we go largest to smallest, we have kilo, hecto, deca. Let me rewrite that. That looks ridiculous. We have a single meter. That single meter counts. Then we have a decimeter, a centimeter, and a millimeter. Okay, so this is the order from largest to smallest. So kilo, so a kilometer is 1,000 meters. Hecto is 100 meters. Deca is 10 meters. Plain meter, just one. Decimeter is 1/10 of a meter. Centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. Millimeter is 1,000th of a meter. And in case you have trouble remembering this, we use this, I don't know what you call this little phrase to remember. King Henry died by drinking chocolate. I said chocolate milk. So K for kilo, H for hecto, D for deca, B for basic unit, D for deci, C for centi, M for milli. So what I like to do is I like to have this written out somewhere on a little whiteboard, on a spare sheet of notebook paper, on a Post-it note, just somewhere. I have that written out so that it is right in front of me at all times, okay? And now let's look at how we would do this. So let's say we have 8,000 meters and we want to convert that to kilometers, okay? So what we do is we figure out where we're starting, okay? So we're starting right here. Pretend that's a little X, and I need to go to kilometers. So I ask myself, which direction is kilometers from meters? It's to the left. How many units to the left? Well, I would have to go back 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I would move my decimal 3 places to the left. What I'm really doing is just dividing. I'm dividing by powers of 10, and it's just going to move my decimal to the left. So if you don't see a decimal point, assume it's at the end, and then we need to move it back 1, 2, 3 places. And that tells me that 8,000 meters is the same as 8 kilometers. And that's it. That's all there is to it. When you're going from a larger unit to a smaller unit, you're really just multiplying by powers of 10. When you're going from a smaller unit to a larger unit, you're just dividing by powers of 10. And all you're really doing is moving a decimal back and forth. Okay, so let's look at another one. Let's say we have 53 meters, but this time we want to convert to millimeters. Let me erase this. There we go. All right. So we're starting here with meter, but this time we want to go to millimeters. So which direction is a millimeter? Well, millimeters are to the right, and they're going to be 1, 2, 3 units to the right. So I take my 53. If I don't see a decimal point, I assume it's at the end, and I move my decimal 1, 2, 3 places to the right. Now notice we're past the end of that number. No big deal. Every time you move, you just fill in a 0. So we would say here that 53 meters is the same as 53,000 millimeters. Let me get a sip. Pardon me. All right, so let's look at another one. Let's say for this one, we have 604 centimeters, and we want to convert to hecto. So hectometers, that's going to go from, well, let me erase a little bit so you can see it. So that's going to go from centimeters. This time we want to go hecto. So we're going to move our decimal to the left 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So I take my 604. I don't see a decimal, so I assume it's at the end. And I'm going to move that decimal 1, 2, 3, 4 times to the left. And I just need to fill in a 0 once I get past that 6. So my final answer here would be that 604 centimeters is the same as 0.0604 hectometers. Okay, and that's it. Let's do one more, and then we'll talk about converting between the two systems. So let's try to block these out so you can see which problem is which. Let's say we have 6.72 decameters. Remember, deca is DA for an abbreviation. And we want to convert it to centimeters. Okay. So let's get rid of that. All right. So we're going to start with deca, which is right here. We want to go to centimeter. So we're going to be moving to the right 1, 2, 3 times. Okay. So I've got my 6.72. I need to move my decimal 3 places to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So that's going to give me 6,720 centimeters. That's a 0. Pretend that's a 0. So we get 6.72 decameters is equal to 6,720 centimeters. And that's really all there is to it. Remember, if you're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, really what you're doing is you're multiplying by powers of 10, which just moves your decimal to the right. When you're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, you're really just moving your decimal to the left, because what you're secretly doing is dividing by powers of 10. So it's all about just moving a decimal place left or right. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to do for this particular video is I want to talk about converting between the two systems. Okay. So converting between the two systems. Okay. Now, when you're converting between the English and the metric measurement systems, you have to go back to the idea of dimensional analysis and unit fractions. Okay. So we use dimensional analysis and unit fractions. That just means that you're going to need those conversions. Okay, so let's go back to the conversion sheet for just a bit. So for the first part of this video, we were looking at converting just within the US measurement system. So converting inches, feet, yards, and miles. Okay, for this part of the video, we're now converting between US and metric. So we're going back to the idea of dimensional analysis and unit fractions, but now we have these conversions. You do not have to memorize these conversions. You will have a conversion sheet with you for any kind of assessment, but you do need to know where to look on your conversion sheet. So again, we're looking at going between English and metric. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. Okay, so first up, let's say we have 8 feet and we want to convert it to centimeters. So centimeters is definitely metric. Anytime you see the word meter anywhere, that's going to be metric. Feet, we already know, is English. So let's go to our conversion sheet and see if we have a conversion that takes us from feet to centimeters. And it just so happens that right here, we have that 1 foot is equal to 30.48 centimeters. Okay, so remember 30.48 centimeters. All right, now remember from the first part of this video, we start with what we know. We have 8 feet. I'm going to write it as a fraction. And now I need a unit fraction that relates feet and centimeters. And from the conversion sheet, we have that 1 foot is 30.48 centimeters. Okay, notice where I put centimeters, notice where I put feet. My goal is to cancel out the units feet, which absolutely happens because I have them top to bottom. And then I want to keep centimeters in my numerator. Okay, so let's clean things up a little bit. My numerator is now 8 times 30.48 centimeters. My denominator is just 1. And when we divide by 1, nothing really happens. So it's not really useful to us. As long as you show me this setup, I'm fine with you doing the multiplication on your calculator. So 8 times 30.48 is 243.84 centimeters. And that is your final answer. So if we have 8 feet, that's equivalent to 243.84 centimeters. Okay, let's try a couple more. All right, next up, let's say we have 20 meters and we want to convert that to yards. All right, so we're going to mosey on over to the conversion sheet. And we want to see if we have a conversion for meters and yards. And it just so happens we do. 1 yard is approximately 0.9 meters. I will tell you this, a lot of these conversions are rounded, they're approximations. You can see here that centimeters and inches, feet and centimeters, those are exact, but the other ones are approximations. So we're not going to get an exact conversion, but we're going to get something pretty darn close, okay? Anyway, in this case, we have 1 yard is approximately 0.9 meters. So let's see what we get here. So remember, we start with what we know. We know we have 20 meters, and we want to write that as a fraction. We then want to multiply by a unit fraction that relates meters and yards. Notice where I put meters, notice where I put yards. I want the meters to cancel top to bottom. That's why I put meters in the denominator. And we have that 1 yard is approximately 0.9 meters. All right, so let's clean things up a little bit. Notice the meters cancel. I'm left with yards in the numerator. When I clean it up, my numerator is going to be 20 times 1 yards. So 20 yards. My denominator is 1 times 0.9. And then I can just do the division on my calculator. Again, show me your setup and then you've earned the right to use your calculator. So 20 divided by 0.9, and we get 22.2 repeating. So if we have 20 yards, that is approximately, or we can say it just is 22.2 repeating yards. All right, and that is your final answer right there. All right, let's try another one. So let's say we have 30 meters, but this time we want to convert it to inches, okay? So let's see if we have an exact conversion that takes us from meters to inches. If not, we may have to do a little playing. So let's go to the conversion sheet. So when I look at this list right here, what I don't see is a conversion that takes me from exactly meters to inches, okay? But we know a few things. We know that we can easily convert within the metric system. So I could very easily convert meters to centimeters, right? And then if I can convert meters to centimeters, I can convert centimeters then to inches, okay? So we're going to convert our meters to centimeters just within the metric system. So doing what we did a few minutes ago where we just move decimals around. Once we get our meters converted to centimeters, we'll then convert to inches. So let's do the first part where we convert meters to centimeters. So remember, it's kilo, hecto, deca, a single meter, decimeter, centimeter, millimeter. All right. We are here, but we want to be here. Okay, so what we need to do is take the 30 and move the decimal to the right twice. So I'm going to move it 1, 2. So we have that 30 meters is really equal to 3,000 centimeters. And this is what we're going to work with now. Okay, so I'm going to take, whoops, let me go back to black ink. So I'm going to take my 3,000 centimeters. I'm going to put it over 1. And now I need to find a conversion that takes me from centimeters to inches. So let's go back to the conversion sheet. All right, so you can see here the very first conversion for English to metric is that 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters. So 1 inch, 2.54 centimeters. We're going to clean this up and then do our division. So centimeters cancel, leaving inches in the numerator. So again, we went from meters to centimeters, centimeters to inches, or we're almost to inches. We're going to clean up now. The numerator is 3,000 times 1 centimeters. The denominator is 2.54. As long as you show me your setup, you can use your calculator. So 3,000 divided by 2.54, we're going to get a crazy decimal. We get 1,181.102362. Let's round it to 1 decimal place. And we get approximately, I am going to change this to approximately since we're definitely rounding. All right. But we get that 30 meters is approximately 1,181.1 centimeters, or inches rather. Let me fix that. There we go. So 30 meters is approximately 1,181.1 inches. All right. And there you have it. One more example, and then that'll kind of wrap up this video. So what if we're talking about a road in Europe that has a speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour? And we want to go ahead and figure out approximately how many miles per hour is this. Now here, this is converting rates. What's different about a rate is rates involve 2 units. So we're talking about 60 miles per single hour. Okay, so you're dealing with 2 units of measure here. So when I write what we know, I'm going to write it as 60 kilometers over 1 hour. So it's not just over a single one, it's over 1 hour now. And I still need to convert the kilometers to miles. Luckily, the hours stay the same, so we don't have to do anything with that. Just like before, I would multiply by something that relates kilometers to miles. Notice where I put the kilometers. I want the kilometers top to bottom to cancel. All right, let's go to our formula sheet really quick. So I know that if I look right here, 1 mile is approximately 1.6 kilometers. So 1 mile is approximately 1.6 kilometers. Let's clean things up a little bit. Kilometers cancel. I have miles in my numerator and hours in my denominator, which is exactly what I want because remember, we're doing miles per hour. All right, clean things up a little bit more. My numerator is 60 times 1 miles. My denominator is 1 times 1.6 hours. And I just need to do the division of 60 divided by 1.6. And we get that this is 37.5 miles per single hour. And that would be your final answer. So don't get too upset if you see a conversion where you've got 2 units. So like kilometers per hour and then converting miles to hour still just requires 1 unit fraction. We could do something fun like what if it was 60 kilometers per hour and we wanted to know how many miles per minute? We could do that. It would just require 2 unit fractions. Okay. That's about it for this video. There is one part that you kind of need to know, and it'll talk about select the best estimate for the measure of each item. Go through those on your own. All right. But that's it. So this is covering how to convert within the metric system and the English metric system, how to convert between the 2 systems. And our focus was really specifically on length. The next video is going to be measuring area and volume. And then the video after that will be measuring weight and temperature. All right. Hope everything goes well.